Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Scenic View podcast. We are nice and warm in the old podcast area, that we'll call it. I'm Jonathan Owens, your communications director, along with Suzanne Beasley, the government relations director, Artis Watkins, the executive director, and Sammy Klein, the podcast producer. We have a special treat for you today, a very interesting topic that everyone will want to hear. So sit back and enjoy the show. So we're not going to start with our usual winter banter of, we did get snow last weekend, so maybe we'll save that to the end. But we have
we're over it by now.
Yeah, everyone's over it, I think. We have a special guest on the podcast today that is of peak interest for all of our members, according to our Facebook page. If you've been on our social media in the last week, you've noticed that there's a lot of talk around retirement and the retirement system. After last Thursday, there was a vote at the Retirement System Board of Trustees meeting. Suzanne, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, a motion was made at the Board of Trustees meeting to use the gains over and above the 6.5%, whatever the actuaries say we have to have. The
Truly required
6.5%.
contribution.
Yes, gosh, so many words. That's 6.5%. So anything over 6.5% will be used towards a COLA for retirees starting in 2027.
So we talked a lot about that on last podcast. We had 3 different posts about it on Facebook, and I think it generated about 600 comments from my count. So that's something that lots of our members really want to talk about. So we decided to call in the big guns, right?
Yes.
So we called in our old friend Sam Watts, who is the executive director of the retirement system, right? And he's held many of jobs at the treasurer's office over the years. How many have you worked with?
I've worked for 3 treasurers and with 4.
Oh,
So
wow.
actually, we ended up doing some intern work and some other work with Treasurer Bowles after he left office. But then they've worked for Treasurer Cowell and Treasurer Falwell, and now Treasurer Breyer.
And you also were in charge of the state health plan there for a while, right?
Yes. I was the director of the executive administrator of the city health plan for the previous 2 years. Now I've been the retirement director for a year. But I spent about 9 years in the retirement system before I went to be the legislative liaison.
So it's safe.
My home, my starting point at the treasurer's office.
So it's safe to say, with the exception of maybe Artis Watkins, no one knows these issues better than you, right?
He knows a lot more and about a lot of issues because I could tell you, Suzanne and I spent many days and sometimes nights in the General Assembly just talking with Sam. He's a wealth of knowledge, again, on so many topics, but definitely retirement, I think, is definitely one that you kind of educated us the most on over the years, Sam. And so
it's mutual. You guys have taught me a lot on
well, you're good people. Our members love you. If you're listening to the podcast and you're a Scenic member, Sam has spent a considerable amount of time over the years in his various roles and functions at the treasurer's office with the Scenic board. He's come to convention. He's done it all. So our members love Sam, and they know when they're hearing from Sam, they're getting the real deal. They're not getting some varnished political spin.
That's right.
So we're thrilled to have him, and let's get right into it. Let's start arguing over retirement, Sam.
So
or maybe we're going to agree, or maybe both.
If you could see the room, they are on opposite sides of the table. So
look, I'm going to tell it. We're having some renovation done, so we're literally in a hotel room with Sam. I think
in a dimly lit hotel.
He might be scared.
Yeah, with a light shining right on. So Suzanne gave us a little overview, but why don't you just give us a kind of a 2 or 3 minute overview of where the system stands and what action that was taken last week?
Yeah. So let me start with where I want to start, with where I want to begin the conversation. I have a button. It's one of those things you can get at Office Depot. I've got this on my desk to remind me that the thing I most want to do as a retirement director is press this button, because this button says COLA on it.
Yeah.
Cost of living adjustment for retirees, because we haven't had a COLA in a very long time, a decent COLA for retirees. And we need to get to a place where I can press this button, and where right now, if I press it, and you won't be able to hear it very well on the podcast, it says the criteria are not met. The legal criteria are not met to pay a COLA right now, but we're working on that.
Okay.
That's what we want to work on. And we took a big step at the board meeting 2 weeks ago, last week.
Last week,
Goodness. The snow.
The snow's
it
throwing
was
us
quite a
off.
snow. Because the thing you have to remember about the retirement system, and we've used this analogy for years, it is like an aircraft carrier. Have you ever seen an aircraft carrier up close, or even driven by one of the over the bridges in Norfolk?
Yeah.
They're huge. They're some of the
Yeah.
largest machines made by humans.
Mm-hmm.
And an aircraft carrier is steady and determined, and it goes in the direction you send it. And it doesn't turn very easily. If you're going to turn the aircraft carrier, you've got to make a few steps ahead of time and know well in advance of where you're going to go. And that's what we've always tried to do with the retirement system. The state retirement system is enormous. We're the third largest payroll in the state of North Carolina, behind Social Security, and then either how you want to count Walmart or the university system. But we are either the second or third, depending on how you want to count everybody. And we're paying $5.5 billion in retirement benefits this year. And most of that goes into the state's economy. That's worth about $20 billion of economic output for the state every year. And we don't take our responsibility lightly. Now, I would argue, and argue frequently, that a COLA is a very good thing for the state to pay for and for to happen, because retirees spend their money.
Right.
They're not usually saving, putting the pension in and not having it do something. They're out, they're buying food with it. They're buying something for friends or family with it. They're using the money. It doesn't sit on the bank and not gain economic growth for the state. So it is a very important topic for us. But turning the aircraft carrier takes a while. And you're at the mercy of a lot of economic forces. So the motion from former Representative Pat Hurley
Thornburg, yeah.
last week gave us a shot at changing policy of how we calculate COLAs in the future, how we calculate paying for it.
What does that mean? It gave you a chance to calculate it differently.
Yeah. So like I said, on the button, there's two things that would let me push this button I have in my hand. Okay. I have to have the legal authority to do so, which means I have to meet certain criteria, and I have to have the money in the right place. Because the first priority is making sure we fund the system before we improve benefits or enhance benefits beyond what's the basic funding of the system. Like I said, aircraft carriers slow the turn. 20 or 30 years ago, maybe not even quite that long, we made a series of what we now know were policy mistakes.
Yeah.
Okay. Hindsight is 20/20. I don't think anyone was trying to make a mistake when they made mistakes like not fully funding, not funding the system, or taking contribution holidays, or not using investment gains in the best ways that they could have possibly done so. But all of that is stuff we have to deal with, and that carries forward.
Yeah, I'd gotten a Twitter spat this week about that very issue, that if it's the opinion of some people. Hey, if you didn't put in 1 year and then you barely put in for a couple of years, so what? That's just a few years, and it was a couple of decades ago. So what? And I think most people don't understand that compounding effect of that so what is kind of huge. And it's, like you said, it's an aircraft carrier you're trying to turn. If you hadn't put fuel in it, and you've gummed the engine up because it was choking, you'll pay the piper later for that. So if you can kind of expand on that, why does it matter if you don't fund it from the employer side? Employees, by the way, always, always, always put in their 6% required by law. It was the state, the legislature, at the behest that time of the retirement system, gave them the green light. You don't have to put anything in. We'll be okay. And so the legislature said, perfect. In 2023, they said, we're not going to put anything in. And then for a couple years after that, put a fraction of 1% and then 5-point-something%. So
2003. We're talking early.
I'm sorry.
2000s.
Yeah, 2003. Did I say 23?
You did.
My goodness, I have done this. I'm on a roll. So so this was 2003, 2004, 2005. System got very mistreated in terms of what the legislature did not put in. How much of an effect did that have?
So think about the long life of retirement benefits. We've made a long-term promise to people. Okay. Now, because people have beneficiaries, if you stopped giving anyone retirement credit, heaven forbid, we don't want that to happen in the state system today. If you cut it off today, ended it, you would still be paying benefits for 123 years that you've already paid, that you've already promised. It takes that long to pay out liabilities, and it takes that long for assets to grow.
Wow.
123 years.
123 years. Approximately. The unfortunate part is, because we're not fully funded, you'd still have to, even if you closed it off, the legislature would still be responsible for putting more money in because the liabilities aren't fully funded right now. And so you want to fully fund those because you never want to not have the money in hand to pay the benefits you need. That doesn't mean we've got enough money in hand to pay benefits for 123 years. It means that we have, if fully funded, means we have enough money with the growth of investments and continued contributions by employers and employees, there would be enough money to pay the benefits. So one of the things that we did correct a few years ago with the help of Scenic in a retirement bill was we put a floor on employer contributions of 6%. So employers would never contribute less than employees, which makes perfect sense because at the current benefit level, at what we promise people, the actual cost is about 12% of their salary each year. So at its core, once we get caught up, it's the employers putting 6% in, the employees putting 6% in. It's a 50-50 partnership with the employees and the employer to fund the benefits that we have. Now, historically and legally, the state is responsible for not hitting the investment returns. Because the state invests the money on behalf of both parties, the state is taking the risk of not hitting the investment returns. And so the years when we did not hit the investment returns, we did not fully fund the liabilities. Because there's three pieces of money coming here. There's the investment returns, the employer funding, and the employee funding. You have to make an assumption from the very get-go. And this is the other thing we were doing last week. We're setting the assumptions for the next 5 years of what we think the investment returns are going to be. We had an investment return assumption that was too high for too long. We assumed we were going to get more money in from investments than we could. Now, they thought when they said it in the early 2000s, in 2000, that, it's going to be great. Well, then all of a sudden 9/11 happened. The market crashed. Other things happened they didn't foresee or leave any wiggle room for.
Mm-hmm.
And then the state would have to make up that differences. And they didn't make it up fast enough because they didn't change the assumption or react the way we should have. Hindsight's 20/20. Once we started lowering the return assumption and made it more achievable, we've been on a path for correction for 7 or 8 years of fixing that issue.
And I also wonder, we've talked a lot recently about the fact that the number of state employees has basically not increased since 2009. So you have all these people that have retired, 2 million more citizens living in the state than in 2009, but pretty much the same number of overall state employees. So there's no way you're going to be able to cover those costs when you have fewer people working than you have drawing from the system. So the cuts to state government, when you add 2 million people, but you don't have the same number of employees, you've not added employees to help those 2 million new citizens of North Carolina, that's got to have an effect on the system too.
It does. I mean, we've never had a lower ratio of employees to retirees than we have right now. And it's only going to decline as we see the retirement trends over the next decade. So
and Sam, unsettling.
It hit me. It was a few weeks ago, I think, for the first time. I was like, good grief, the effect this has. The idea that you're going to be cutting government because we're going to save money. We're going to cut and cut and cut positions to save money. Then you end up having to pay on the other side in your employer contribution to keep your retirement system solvent. Whereas if you had the employees to keep up with your population and they were all putting 6% of their check in every month, we'd probably be clicking along just fine for cheaper than it's costing them to pay 18% employer contribution.
Well, I have to leave the decision of what the appropriate size of state government is to the legislature and to others to comment on that. But mathematically, what you're saying is accurate. I mean, the more people in the system, the easier it is, the lower the rate can be. But from the perspective of the retirement system, I care how much money comes from that rate.
Right.
And so it's going to be higher. If you're going to have fewer employees, it's going to be a higher rate on the employers.
Yeah.
As long as you have unfunded liabilities. Once you have funded liabilities, and we get back to the 6 and 6, that's what we showed. That's what we were able to respond to react to last week. The charts we showed, and I've got a copy here that the team has looked at and reviewed very carefully. We're in an environment over the next 10 years where the employer contribution rate will be declining. It'll be going down, even despite the fact that employee count is not increasing. But the rate can go down. It has been going up steadily for the last 10 years. Our big concern over the last 10 years was that it was going to hit 25% of payroll.
Right.
It's hit 17.5%, and we think we're at the point where we panicked employers. I mean, our good friends over at UNC Healthcare left the ship a year and a half ago and left behind millions of dollars of unfunded liability that everybody else has to pick up. Yeah, now that's the General Assembly's choice, and the General Assembly says they bear that liability, but that is there's a point where the employer contribution rate is too high for employers to bear, too high for budgets to bear. Now, what also happened that time while it was going up was that the responsibility for covering that was also fell on retirees in the form of not having cost of living adjustments.
Right.
And so this is where we're getting right to Pat Hurley Thornburg's motion. All of the investment gains were used to offset the employer contribution rates in the last 5 years. Everything above the assumed rate of return was used to offset for the employers. So what Pat's motion does for the future is it lets us put a policy in place, which we'll vote on in April, we hope, that will come up with a split between how much of it is the offset for the employers versus how much could be used for retirement benefit increases.
Okay. So just for people listening, former Representative Pat Hurley Thornburg, who is now on the Retirement System Board of Trustees and who's always fought for folks' retirement rights and for them to get a COLA, made the motion Sam was just talking about to change a policy. Here's the rub for me. If the law doesn't change, do they care? The General Assembly doesn't have to worry about what your policy is, right?
The General Assembly can always do what the General Assembly
wants,
anytime, and whether it's the state or the local system.
Yeah.
So we do have two large systems. At the risk of going too far in the weeds here, the local system has different rules for cost of living adjustments than the state system.
And a higher formula.
Slightly. The local system trustees can grant a COLA without permission from the General Assembly.
Yes.
If they meet the criteria in the system, they have to have that are laid out for doing it responsibly. I think it's possible that we're heading toward a policy where the General Assembly could be asked to delegate that authority to the state board too, in a similar fashion, as long as you have well-defined criteria.
Yeah.
You have the money in hand, you have the criteria, then a COLA can be granted. And it takes it out of the political sphere as much as you can, and you're putting it on the decision of, do we have the money? So the idea is, I think the legislature would like to see us fully fund the retirement system from the investment gains. And so with the other changes that we made on the investment front, other things that's the path we're headed toward, not where the General Assembly is using taxpayer funding, general fund funding, at the very beginning of the process when they contribute the employer contribution rate, as long as we keep it well-defined and adequate for the system. And then the retirement system will be responsible for generating the gains that can be used for COLAs. So what they were doing in the early 2000s is they were just making investment gains like crazy because interest rates were going up. And so they were paying COLAs. They were increasing the accrual rate for benefits, and they were offsetting the employer contribution rate to zero.
Well, they did very little during that period for employees, for folks who were going to retire. I mean, our formula is piss poor compared to most states, at least half of them.
Our formula for the states that don't do Social Security, if you count those in the mix, then we're on the lower end. If you count only the states that, like us, where the employees get Social Security, so a lot of places, public employees don't get Social Security.
Yeah.
And there's still some local governments in North Carolina where they don't get Social Security.
Oh, I didn't know there's any local governments left like that.
So there's quite a few. And they have to adopt it, and they have employee votes and whatnot for Social Security. I'm actually the state Social Security administrator for those elections, believe it or not.
You got too many jobs.
All the hats.
One of my side gigs.
All the hats.
It's core to the
The
job.
Marco Rubio of North Carolina.
Sam Rubio.
But for the systems, we're dead solid in the middle for the places where you're not having to be Social Security and the retirement system too. Maybe it's easy to use the Charlotte firefighters as an example. They have a separate retirement system for firefighters in Charlotte. And the Charlotte firefighters don't get Social Security. So their accrual rate is like 4%.
Yeah.
Because you're covering what would be Social Security and their retirement as well. So we're only covering the retirement. We are in the exact middle of the states that do participate in Social Security.
Okay. And as far as COLAs go,
yeah,
our neighbors are giving more COLAs than we've thought about for a couple of decades now.
Right. Well, and they're also building unfunded liabilities when they do that in some ways. Because if you think about it, when you pay for a COLA, you're adding to that unfunded number that you have to plan for in the future. And for the next currently 12 years, but now the other policy change last week was to change that amortization period to 17 years.
Yeah.
So that you can have a little lower amount put in each year. So that again, that'll help us make the COLAs more affordable too. You're paying for a share of that for each of the next 17 years to get the system funded. So the idea is you want to have enough investment gains so that you can responsibly fund it, that the gains are going to be sufficient to keep funding it until you've fully funded the benefit increase. And that's what we're trying to wrestle with. And so the declining rate environment I mentioned a minute ago, where the contribution rates go down, is our opportunity to say, okay, is the General Assembly and are the employers that have to manage their receipts separately, and there are a few of those across the state, are they prepared to let the rates go down more slowly than they would if they did nothing in order to allow retirees to share in the good news that we're hoping to get? In other words, can we have the employer rate still go down, but not go down as much, and increase retiree benefits at the same time? Is that a reasonable compromise? And I think that's what we're trying to pull all the stakeholders together to talk about and to think through and to enact the new policies that Pat's motion set us up for at the April board meeting. So that's what we think is in the ideal world, everybody gets something and we're able to help retirees improve benefits at the same time, not lose employers or have other agencies like UNC Healthcare that want to flee because the retirement system is too, air quote, expensive for them.
So let's go back to one thing that you mentioned that ties in exactly with what you were just talking about. But I worry that our members may not understand what you meant by, before this policy, investment gains were used to lower the amount the General Assembly had to put in, right?
That's what we've done for the last 5 years.
So
and
in effect,
really the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And we've often talked about with our members too, that the way COLAs get funded, the system is built to provide its own COLAs. So that would come from the employer contribution, the employee's contribution, and investment gains. And investment gains have not been in an amount sufficient enough. Now, I know there's other policies that were implemented in, the last 5 years, the ECRISP and things like that would have affected how those returns could be used to provide a COLA or not provide a COLA, because whatever we were making had to go towards the unfunded liability. Am I explaining that correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's exactly right. I mean, we know we're the aircraft carrier, okay?
Right.
Don't forget that. We're the aircraft carrier, and we know where we want to go. We just got to turn slowly and get to where we need to go, because we know we want to get to a point where it's a 50-50 partnership with the employers and the employees at the initial funding stage, and then the system creates the investment gains to adjust for inflation. Right now, that's not allowed. I mean, it's thought about, it's talked about, but that's not the criteria we can use without having the authority and the money to do so. So we want to get to the point where it's the shared relationship with the employers and employees at the initial point, and then the system makes the gains to cover the increases in benefits for retirees.
Because that's an exorbitant amount of money for a COLA. It's a lot of money for a COLA. So when there's not money in the system to provide for a COLA, that leaves scenic at the door of the legislature, asking for money to fund this COLA. And that's what 1% is well over $500,000, I believe. How much is 1% of a COLA?
A 1% COLA for the state system costs $586 million. So for each 1% is $586 million for a permanent COLA. For a one-time supplement, it's $57 million.
So that makes sense, because now, we're usually walking in the door, looking for a 2% COLA at least. So it would be over $1 billion for 2% that we're asking the legislature to fund, which makes that one-time supplement, which is not recurring money, look much more attractive. And we're going to get that money before we're going to get $1 billion out of the legislature.
It's exactly the situation. We're always putting less money into the system that's coming out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the system's always making gains.
Yeah.
So it's never not a good deal for the state.
Yeah.
And I think the typical knee-jerk reaction is, and it makes sense to me that without knowing all this stuff and all the history, it would be, is that, hey, we've been putting an awful lot in compared to what we used to, so let's back off of that. The problem is no one ever thinks about things like when the governor escrowed retirement funds, diverted them before they could even get to the system. And Scenic had to sue. It took years. We had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to get that money put back. That was employees' money. That was the state of North Carolina appropriated that. And then it was a budget crisis. And so the idea was, we'll just grab this money. And it was Governor Easley at the time. He diverted those funds. And We shouldn't have had to sue to get people's money back. It took forever to get it back. And then that's when you saw the funding holiday and all but funding holiday. So the idea has always been, if the state's in a financial fix, one of the places they can go to alleviate this pressure on themselves is the retirement system. Either put less in it, take it all together. That's crazy to me when you're talking about a system, like you said, that you have to fund for the long haul. Mm-hmm. You can't just this ad hoc tiny bit tons that you put in it. That is so nuts to me. If we had just been consistent all along, and it would have meant having to make a policy decision that this matters. But I think that's what you're getting at with Pat's motion for the policy to change to where each side would put in 6%. Is that correct?
That's what we're trying to get to. That's the vote.
And so that's your policy, and you do think there's some kind of way that could be made law?
Well, so the law is already that the employer contribution can't drop below the employee contribution. We got that
right.
a few years ago.
You
guys helped us. But what we're trying to get to is the ability, as the rates are coming down, to not have to use the investment gains to offset the employer contribution rates. In other words, I'm hoping that the future state of what we're trying to get to is we're taken out of that political conversation and out of those budget conversations where we're seen as a balancing item.
Right. How would you make enough gains? How much would you have to make for the unfunded liability to stop eating up all the gains?
Well, we would have had to make the last calendar year, which we measured these on a calendar year. A lot of things are measured on the fiscal year, but we made 13% roughly in the retirement system. We would have had to make 18% to have covered all the gains and start moving the other direction in order to pay a COLA this time. So 13 still was pretty good, but still shy of the 18. As we go into the next few years, as the investment gains grow, as the liabilities that we have had to eat from changing the assumed rate of return, as those come off of the system, it's going to take less money to do that because we've been paying off those unfunded liabilities. The unfortunate part of that is that retirees haven't gotten COLAs while we were doing that because we had the
So how long do you think before they see one?
So again, I cannot promise. The director, I'm not the genie that makes money come out of thin air, but it could come as early as 27. That would be the earliest. I think that statistically, that's possible.
And I think that state treasurer has said that in a story, in a media story as well recently, right?
Yes. Now it's an optimistic goal, and our folks are working very hard on the investment side to make that possible because there's some possibilities of making that happen. But again, I wish I could promise it, but there's no way I can promise that because you never know what's going to happen with. The U.S. could make some bad monetary policy decisions in the next.
Well, I was going to say, what if the market falls out? I mean,
the market could blow up, or we could do something that with the Fed Reserve that doesn't make sense for us, that hurts us.
Yeah. Well, and that's my other question. So, because we don't know what the market will do, the systems that run where the board gets to decide COLAs, that's great if it's a great stock market year, but otherwise, doesn't that take the onus off of the General Assembly that should be there? This is an employee benefit. This isn't a gift. This isn't, some kind of aid. It is not. You pay less than the private sector, not you. We pay less than the private sector as a state for state employees to come work. Less than they would make by an average of about 14% than they would in the private sector, with the goal for them being, okay, I'll make a lot less, but I'll have solid benefits. And yet what we've seen in at least the last decade and a half is, oh, well, look, we wanted you to have solid benefits, but
so I guess
we don't have enough money for you.
The trade-off in the policy trade-off thing, because I think what I'm saying is a fundamental shift in how the General Assembly wants to view the retirement system. Like I said, we've been a balancing item in budget negotiations over the years, usually to our detriment. Is the ability to be allowed to generate the COLAs and grant investment returns and just have the General Assembly not have us as a balancing item worth the trade-off of eventually the only thing we have would be the possibility of what we've had to do for the last 10 years. I don't think we're any worse off if we're trying to do that on our own than we have been for the last 10 years. And we might be, and I think we would be better off getting to that stable state, the stable state where we're trying to keep the employer benefits, the employer contribution and the employee contribution as an equal partnership. And then everything else we do, either making up deficiencies in investment gains or paying for benefit increases, is done by the system itself. It's a fundamental shift, but
question.
it's a question. I can't promise to Joe somebody wants. That's kind of what we see and what we're hearing as a policy direction.
So I think that, what you were talking about with your Twitter spat, and I watched that whole thing transpire, and I had a few thoughts that I was not brave enough to put down. But it seemed like that person obviously was arguing for a defined contribution system, right?
Yeah, just put everybody on a foot. So what happened in the quote Twitter spat is that a point was made that the state has had to put a whole lot more in employer contribution than they had 10 years ago. That's right. For all the reasons Sam just laid out, that's what it's cost to keep the fund rolling and to pay down some of this unfunded liability. And I started a back and forth. And it was somebody from, to be clear, and don't want to make it sound all mystery, it was somebody from the John Locke Foundation. And I was kind of interested because I thought surely the John Locke Foundation would want, everything very visible. Yeah. And a 401k, his argument was, hey, if you put everything in a 401k instead of the retirement system, then everybody could see what they're paying.
Because it's your own individual account.
The problem I had with that is that I don't think we should expect more transparency from the private sector than we do from our own government. And these are employees of the government. Mm-hmm. So I think that was our main issue in the debate that we were arguing over. The other thing is just the money itself. This is an employee benefit.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I was thinking about. It's kind of convoluted, but if you don't think that state employees should have a defined benefit system, and then you're also, cutting their health care and making that program different or worse, and you're not paying them as much,
right? How
are you going to recruit people? And I think it gets to a fundamental attitude towards state workers that maybe this person.
There's great resentment over any dollar that's spent on state workers. And be clear about that.
Yeah, we've always had trouble with public perception.
What makes state employment any different than working at McDonald's?
It's considered lesser than. Most people think that people working for the state can't get a job somewhere else, and they're working for the state for that reason.
Yeah, but I'm just saying you lose all your competitive advantages in recruiting.
And sometimes these people are working for the state.
Yeah.
That think that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when it's really funny.
So there's so much to putting everything together with the retirement system and making sure that there's money available to pay out the COLA that retirees were promised when they came to work for the state. So John and I stayed busy on social media the last couple of days, just trying to answer people and talk to them who their main concern. Everything we've talked about today may not even go far as what what they've got on their mind. Their main concern is that we're not getting a COLA this year. They're not even thinking 2027. They know they haven't gotten one in years. Is there something that we could say to them to reiterate?
Is there
break it down a little bit more simple to something? Trying not to use the word comforting, but
I'm trying to help you, and I'm not knowing what to say either.
Hope is on the way.
Yeah.
That's where, like I said, we're turning the aircraft carrier, try to get to where it's going to happen. That wasn't possible 3 to 4 years ago. We've had the same conversation every year for quite a while now. But I think what we're seeing, I think what you should take from Pat's motion last week is that there's actual hope that we could move to the direction where people want to go.
And we don't want to put all the onus on the retirement system, because there's another aspect. I mean, the legislature could just fund a COLA, right? I mean, I know that's a lot of money, but
no, because at the legislature, the Fiscal Research Division, or actually maybe it wasn't fiscal research, but somebody at the legislature said, look, if you're going to calculate it, you have to multiply the amount because you do pay it out for more than 1 year.
Yeah.
So
it's just a huge number.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a huge number.
So theoretically they could, but in practice it would just be way too much, right?
It would never pass. You couldn't possibly get a budget if you did that the way they say you have to calculate it.
So I got one more question for you, Sam. Have you tried lottery tickets? We have $116 billion. Just throw $1 billion at lottery tickets. You never know. I mean, no, does that not sound?
That's probably not something we'll head for.
Well, Sam, I know how hard you've worked for the folks that work for this state and the taxpayers. You take their interest just as seriously, and we just appreciate you to no end.
Appreciate you guys too. Love working with you over the years and enjoy our partnership and friendship.
Indeed.
Well, I guess it's time for the question of the week.
John's wacky weird question of the week.
So we did prepare Sam quickly that we just told him it was going to happen. Most of the time I just drop it on people, right? But I guess the Winter Olympics are coming up this week, and I like the Winter Olympics. I like the Summer Olympics too, but the winter is just like so different. You don't ever do these sports or anything, so it's fun to watch. So what is your favorite Winter Olympic sport?
Start with our guest, Sam.
Sam.
Gotta say curling.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just, you could go for any of the classics, but curling is it's just fun to watch.
It's interesting.
I remember that, like, never heard of curling until like 20 years ago when it was all of a sudden in the Olympics and everyone was talking about it. It seems very
awesome.
cool.
People, it really caught on.
Yeah. I think everybody could see themselves with a little broom out there.
Maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe we're thinking if we had to do one, where would we be least likely to injure ourselves? Although if you think about it, what they're doing is kind of amazing, so we would injure ourselves. But yeah, I love the curling too. And we were talking about it. There's a place in the Triangle that has curling. So there's
just
like
picture
interest in the Southeast in curling.
Let's get a scenic team together.
There you go.
Oh my goodness.
What about you, Sammy? What's your favorite?
I feel like I should go last.
Okay, you want to go last?
I got a long answer.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Okay.
The Gen Z answer.
I guess I'll have to go with bobsledding. It's so cool.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
cool.
like has kind of a NASCAR angle, but I do love the bobsledding. Snowboarding's pretty cool too, especially like the half pipe thing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Snowboarding, because I can't do any of that. So it's fascinating to watch.
And also, obviously, the soap opera of the ice skating, right?
Always.
Every year there's a different. It's like a similarity between ice skating and gymnastics in the summer. They're like the same thing. So
they're both kind
everyone loves that.
Uber athletes, you know.
Yeah.
I think the luge is cool because we used to pretend we were luging, get on our flexible flyers on our backs with our feet controlling the steering, holding on. And
did you do that last week?
No, I wouldn't do it now. That was just regular sledding.
All right.
I like luging.
All right, Sammy, hit us.
So I do love figure skating because it's so beautiful and it
drama.
reminds me of gymnastics. I do like drama too, but that's not in my own life, in other people's lives. But I'm really excited to watch the Nordic combined, which is a combination of cross-country skiing and ski jumping. And it's one of the oldest Olympic sports. But the crazy thing is, it's the only Olympic sport that bars women from competing.
What?
It's the only one. And there is currently a girl from Colorado. Her name is Annika Malasinski. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce her last name.
Well, that's a name.
But her brother is competing in the men's Olympic Nordic combined. And she is there with him with a bunch of other women who compete professionally. And they are protesting the fact that women cannot compete in this. And it's the only sport
I didn't know
that they
was
cannot
one
compete.
left.
That's the only Olympic sport.
That's unexpected for something called the Nordic combined. You'd think those Nordic countries are all progressive and stuff.
And so now this is a sport that is on the verge of not even being included in the 2030 Olympics.
What is the big deal? Like, why are women not included?
Good question. It's not about capability. Women are just as capable of doing it, and they've proved that, but they're not allowed. That's the crazy thing.
Okay, so ChatGPT says it's because there aren't a lot of women who compete in it, and so it lacks interest.
And
yeah,
there's clearly interest if there are women out there fighting to be able to compete.
Yeah,
if they have built up curling to where we have it around here,
there's women's curling.
You can get it done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I'm looking forward to, especially since it could be the last year that it's in.
Now I'm going to be
Olympics.
looking into that too. That's interesting.
Sam, do you have a hot take on women's Nordic combined?
I think progress happens and progress will happen. I do recall growing up, we didn't know what hockey was in North Carolina.
No, we didn't.
True.
That's true.
So things do change over time.
Yeah. I remember when we got the hockey team in Greensboro. Well, the Hurricanes were in Greensboro first, and we were like, what? We're getting a hockey team before a baseball team?
Well, we had one before. It wasn't NHL, but we had a little hockey team. The Raleigh Ice
Cap.
Do you remember the first year they played at Dorton Arena?
Yes. Yeah, I went.
That's awesome.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
Hockey is so fun.
Meanwhile, hockey is the only team sport that my dad could actually get me to sit down and watch with.
Oh, I wonder why, Sammy.
Boy aquariums.
What did you call it?
It's fascinating because I can't keep...
Apparently the young ladies like the... Are they like missing teeth and stuff?
Yes, they've all had their teeth.
They have fake teeth. They're not walking around with gaps in their teeth whenever they're not in the boy aquarium.
Okay.
Sam is looking like, you brought me to a hotel room. You bullied me. And now I'm listening to this.
I'm not going to ask Sam if he has any male hockey takes or anything.
He's done with us at this point.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Sam. And we love working with you. Obviously, we didn't want to put you on the hot seat too bad, but I hope you'll come back and see us again.
Yeah.
Anytime you want me.
I think there's a lot more to hear from Sam from what I can tell.
Always. Right?
In a good way.
All right. And enjoy the rest of your week.